Hey, I'm Marlon. I DJ and produce under the name Lisene, as well as running the On Rotation label. I'm also in a couple of groups such as Space Cadets and Scoville Unit. So today I'm here to have a little play around with Arturia's Pigments synth, which is, I think it's 4th version now. So I was actually just messing around with this and kind of checking through some presets, and I think that's a really good way to get to learn a new synth, because what you can do is understand, okay, what presets are they putting, you know, right in your face, because they're going to really want to show off the capabilities of the synth. And then from there you can kind of just reverse engineer them, work out all the different features, and kind of relate them to other synths that you might already have. So in this case, I pretty much just clicked through about 5 times and I got to this really nice sound. So we got a sort of so that's really nice. And how's that happening? So let's just kind of unpack this sound. How's it working? So instantly, one thing you might notice about this synth is that the mod matrix is really simple and it's up front. That's actually one of the things I like the most about it. I don't know about you guys, but like when I get a new synth, I tend to kind of dread opening up the mod matrix, because usually it's just like a whole new setup, a brand new confusing kind of sea of like knobs and assignments and things that don't totally make sense at first. But actually this was one of the smoothest learning curves to a synth I've had in a really, really long time, and it's because the mod matrix is right here. So you can pretty much just see, okay, we click on this and we can see it's moving through these values. So these functions are essentially like little step sequencers, so kind of half LFO, half step sequencer. You can set them to like sequence start, you can set them to re-trigger. You actually have a lot of gating options there. But yeah, if you just want to see what it's going to, you can just click there. You can see here how much the modulation amount is. You can see exactly where it's going and what it's doing. And then also you can see these have macro controls on them. So you can stick a load of stuff onto one knob, or like assign one for like both filters. There's a really wide range of possibilities there. So how's this sound actually working? So let's just listen to it again. So what's going on here is we've got these 2 sample engines and they've got some different sounds in them. So you can see like classical guitar, vibraphone, music box. I think we had a little tambourine there as well, give it a kind of medieval feel. But yeah, it's essentially using these function envelopes to move this tuning around. And actually you might notice here that as soon as I hover over this, you can see exactly where the assignments to this parameter are coming from, and the amount as well, which I think is really, really useful for just instantly kind of understanding, again, how a sound was made when we're trying to unpack it here. So if we look here, we can see it's just kind of tuning between these different samples, and it's also playing them forwards and backwards, which is really cool. You can see on the direction here, we have a little bit of mod. So if we just use the mod wheel, we can actually change how much it reverses. So you can see there, now we're totally reversed on every single sample, but here we just have a little bit coming through. You might notice as well, as I move the mod wheel, the visual was just updating here, which is super useful. Again, just having all of these parameters in one place where you can really easily see where everything's going instead of having to click into a few menus is actually super underrated as a design choice. And I really, really, really like what that does for the workflow, because it makes it super fast. So this was pretty much 3 or 4 minutes into like opening the synth that I found this patch, and I decided to just kind of build something around it to kind of show off what it can do. So here we have the sound again. So I've run it through a little bit of processing. So I'll just talk about what's going on here. So let's just listen to it now. I'll probably just back that down a little bit actually. So yeah, we're essentially using the Tantra, which is a great kind of multi-effects unit where you can sequence filters, you can sequence distortion, delay, flanges, all of that. And you have like a number of envelopes which you can then assign to other stuff. So basically just using that to kind of step this bandpass filter around, which then goes into a delay. So essentially, it's just a slightly more interesting delay for the purposes of this. I'm not using it super aggressively on this sound, but I'm using it on a couple of others, so we'll get to those. Then we just got Soothe, which is just soothing a few of these big resonances. So you can see here some of these frequencies are just a little bit harsh coming through. So really quick settings. I haven't really dialed these in too hard, but yeah, it's doing the job. Then we have a nice bit of compression from the UAD 76 and chorus from the studio as well, doing the secret trick where you can hold down shift and press 2 buttons at once. Then it's just going into a limiter to just kind of control any unruly peaks that are coming as a result of having all that delay and also the kind of big transient spikes from those individual hits. Then sidechain that's not doing anything, let's delete it. And then a sidechain that is doing something. So nice. So the main thing for me to do after that is to start building out things around it. And for me personally, I tend to always begin loops if I don't have a really strong idea of what I want to do. So yeah, we got this cool part here, but I haven't got like a big idea for a melody in my head or like a drum pattern or anything like that. I pretty much always just start filling in other synths around it and make them quite simple, but add to the groove, because I find that if you can get the groove of the synths and the melodies to be really strong, then adding the drums in actually becomes quite easy, because it becomes a case of like, oh yeah, well there's obviously kind of only one place where that can go, where it sounds really good, as opposed to having like a complete drum groove and then having to like kind of place the synths into the little holes while making sure that it's good, which is a lot harder to do. So I much prefer to start with synths. So when I'm doing that, what I'm thinking is, okay, what kind of sounds are already in the track? So do we have lots of kind of long legato paddy type sounds, or do we have kind of short sharp sounds? Have we got like lots of nice kind of synthy resonant sounds, or is there a lot of organic sample based stuff going on? And when I think of that, I'm basically thinking, okay, let me add like the opposite of that, or whatever's going to be really complementary to that, and making sure that we're kind of filling all the frequencies. So thinking, okay, what octave is the sound hitting? And have we got something, you know, from the bass up to the point where the notes start getting a bit too high to like properly enjoy? Do we have something in every octave there for those like 4 or 5 octaves? So we have some quite high notes getting hit by this. This is actually covering like 3 octaves, which is nice. It's going to help. You can see it's kind of filling out a lot of the mids for us already. But we definitely need some more sound. So I really wanted to get like a drone going under this to kind of anchor it, because right now, as you can see, we've done some EQing and we've taken out the low end as well as some problem frequencies. So I was thinking, let's kind of reintroduce that low growly feel. So I actually just used another preset on Pigments, and this one's really cool because this is using the wavetable synth. So what we have here is the this FM wavetable, and this has been controlled by this slow LFO. So I had to change this to free running so that it wouldn't re-trigger with the notes, as it's only a 4-bar loop. But if you wanted to have it kind of trigger over a longer period, I'd probably just leave it on what it was. We've also got a phaser that is moving around on its own. You can see on the LFOs being assigned to it, just move it around really slowly. So if we add that in, let's just hear that on its own. So you can see how the waveform is moving through the wavetable as the LFO triggers it, and how the phaser is kind of moving in tandem with that, and how that's impacting the frequency spectrum, creating a really nice effect. I also added some flanging to that, and then some chorus. Also just sidechaining it again to help it fit into the groove. So the next sound that I felt like should be added was some kind of pad behind everything else, and I want it to be a little bit rhythmic, so I used the sling filter to do that. We'll come to that in a sec, but for the initial sound, we're pretty much just using Pigments here. So let me just turn off the effects for now, and I'll give you the solo channel. This is a off-the-shelf preset sound. I'm pretty sure it's like that's the first one in the pad section, just to give you an idea of how gorgeous some of these sounds are. I was really blown away actually by the kind of depth of sound that comes out of the synth, because it can do really lush pads. It can also do really sharp metallic kind of FME sounds. It can do like everything. Which I'm kind of actually a little bit shocked by the range of this thing, to be honest, as I've been exploring a little bit more. So yeah, processing wise, we're just going to take out the low end just for control. There's not really much there. I pretty much just do this as a reflex these days on anything that isn't bass. Just watch out you're not like taking it up to like here when you don't need to, because a lot of mixes that I hear from like sort of intermediate producers have that kind of hole in the low mids where the sound just sounds a little bit thin. So make sure you're letting a little bit of those frequencies through, just not too much. Then we've got the sling filter, one of my favorites, which basically is adding that modulation in where the sound is kind of bandpass filtering slowly up through the frequencies. So this is just a representation of the frequency spectrum. These are different filter bands. This is what's happening to the sound over this period, so 1 bar. You can also do some cool stuff like you can kind of make it all phasey, but in this case I just wanted the motion. Then some flanger, even more stereo width, just taking out some of the low frequencies added in by that flanger, and 2 compressors for some reason, 2 side chains. That one isn't doing anything. Let's get rid of it. Happy days. Alright, so yeah, from there it was kind of a case of like, alright, we got some longer sustained sounds. We've got this kind of randomized high sound that's taking care of most of the melodic needs of the track. So at this point we're just looking for backing, for things to sit behind everything else and kind of ground it, both sonically and rhythmically. So I'm thinking kind of more earthy, resonant type sounds. So let's have a look at what we came up with. So this is one of the nice leads from Pigments. So we'll just take off the processing and have a little listen to what we've got. So really simple pattern. And the sound has just got a bandpass filter that's moving around on it. Pretty simple stuff. Again, we can see in here exactly how this is working. So we have the function moving to the volume controller here, which is the gate, which we're not using at the moment, but as soon as we turn it on, you can see that the visual updates for it in real time. We're not really doing a sustain note, so it doesn't work so well, but if we were to hold one down, nice. So yeah, you got a number of different filter types as well. So like MS20, SEM, Jupiter 8, Matrix 12. There's a lot of really nice sounding filters. So we're just using the bandpass one here. There's just the one that preset came with, but it gives a lot of character to the sound. So from there, just using that Tantra plugin again to just gate it a little bit more, add some more motion and delay into the sound. So that kind of automating distortion is really nice. How that second time it hits, there's a bit more distortion. This is actually just a preset. I was just kind of flicking through till I got something good, but that's the beauty of having these plugins, is that a lot of the time having the idea to use the plugin is more important than having like some super crazy sequencing idea that you came up with and is like the coolest thing ever. Sometimes it's just a case of like, oh yeah, that sound could use a bit of this thing, and then I don't really know what I want to do with it, but I know because I've used it enough that this is the right plugin for the job. And then you can usually use the presets to get you either like most of the way to the result, and then use your own knowledge to tweak it to the point where it's eminently exactly what you wanted it to be, or you get lucky like I've continually done throughout this little project and find something that was better than what you had in mind. Which is great when that happens. So then just doing some EQ, just taking a little bit of the bark out of that sound. So these kind of frequencies are those ones there. So turn that off. Or versus It's a little bit more controlled. Then we got the echo involved, just on the mids here with the filter. Just the cool thing here is that we're using the mid-side mode, so the sides are echoing in 16th notes, and the mids are echoing in dotted 8th notes, which means that we get a really nice kind of stereo spread for this sound without having to do too much work. So let's have a little listen to that. So you can hear that on the sides, the sound is really, really wide and it's echoing quickly. And in the middle, we get that nice kind of rhythmic 8-note vibe, which is adding a lot to it. Then just cranking that into a limiter a little bit to boost the quieter parts of the signal, and then just chop the top off. So I'm just using this as a kind of very lazy compressor and clipper, kind of what a limiter is. But you know, you can be a bit more exact if you want, but a lot of the time, just really basic settings like this will do what it needs to do. I just want to control the volume and boost the quiet parts of the sound. I haven't even changed the release or anything because it's just working fine. So then I'm thinking, okay, with these parts we have a lot of the kind of beats in the bar covered. Now I'm thinking about maximizing frequencies and overall balance in the mix. So I'm thinking like we need something in that kind of low register again. So we've added this sound, and this one is again just a preset. It's a really nice one. They're all pretty damn nice, to be honest. So it's just a so you can see here we just got this notch filter, which is being adjusted by this LFO, and that's pretty much all the controls. And you can see that there's actually two LFOs operating here. And we have the LFO1 modulating the rate of LFO2. So you can see that here it's just going real slow, and then it speeds up, and that's making the movement on here happen. So yeah, having all these in the middle the whole time, again, I can't say it enough. It's such a game changer, and it makes it so much easier to understand what's going on in these complex patches, which will make your synthesis knowledge a lot better, because it's not just like, oh, that preset's cool, but like the cool thing is hidden in like page 12 of the mod matrix that I never look at anyway because it's really scary. It's like, oh yeah, I hover over that thing and then I hover over that thing and it tells me exactly what's going on. But hang on, wait, this thing's moving weirdly, but why? Oh wait, look, the rate's moving. Why is that? Oh look, LFO1 is doing it. So you can really just unpack everything that's going on inside really cool, complex sounds in a really, really quick and simple way, which a lot of plugins really fail to do. So yeah, let's just listen to all of these together again. So and then let's get that top melody involved. So great, all these sounds are really cool. All that's missing now is a little bit of movement. So my next step is always to, once I've got a sound and I know I'm going to want movement on it at some point in the track, is just get the whole thing into an instrument rack and start using the macros. So that's what we've got here. So we've got the Pigments, the 3 macros from there, so the timbre, the octaves, and the release on the sound as well. So let's just listen to this and kind of have a little play around. We've also got the bandpass filter on that tangent that I was talking about, so we can just kind of bring out more of the high there without affecting the original Pigment signal. And vice versa, we can also leave the tangent bandpass running, but bring down the frequencies of the Pigments. And now we don't really hear the tangent processing, but we get a nice kind of squishy high end from that bandpass filter. Whereas when we bring it down through the frequencies that are active, we can really hear it start to pick out certain parts of the sound, which is really cool. Someone with a bit more time or a bit more creative-minded might do something like putting an LFO and assigning it to this bandpass, and having it kind of sweep around this sort of range. That might be a good use of an LFO. So let's just reset that to where it sounds good. So that's another tip, actually. Always, if you're going to do something like this, always save a snapshot of the just default good settings, because you might just end up assigning it to some parameters, or like, for example, I've got the Mini Lab keyboard, which I'm going to talk about later in the video, plugged in, and if I just accidentally knock one of these, oh, see, it's going to change the controls, and then I'm not going to know what it was on, so just reset. Happy days. So the next type of sound that we're missing from this is obviously a big juicy bass. Here's one I made earlier. So melodically, we kind of stick into the pentatonic vibe that the synths have been giving off, and pretty much the only complex detail inside this is just the changing of the note length, and also on this second run through we get a little pitch bend, which I was quite happy with, to be honest. Just adds a little bit of flavour, and like with these types of sounds where this bass line is just going to be rolling through the whole track, the kind of quality of it is it just sits nicely in the mix. It's kind of a little bit wide, a little bit legato, a little bit kind of lazy. It's in its timing, it's not super tight, because it's the whole track itself has got that kind of cruisy vibe, so I didn't want the bass to be super like kind of feeling. So I did actually experiment with that by bringing the release down on the VCA, but it kind of just sounds wrong in the mix with everything else compared to when that release is just super low. We've got it side chains to the kind of kick drum that we'll bring in a bit anyway, so we're not really muddying it up too badly there, but having the notes kind of extend over the downbeats just helps add to that, yeah, just super cruisy, laid back kind of vibe, because that's kind of what the song's about. So at this point you're probably thinking, okay, where are the drums? Let's hear it with the drums. Luckily got you covered there as well. So yeah, Pigments has a wide selection of drum sounds in it, and I really enjoyed this kind of kick sound, this 808 kick sound, which is just using a really kind of resonant filter to give it that that kind of classic 808 pitch envelope sound. So we can see there we just got that motion again. So in the cutoff here we got a lot of movement from the mod wheel, aftertouch, envelope, the macros. So what does that sound like if we just adjust these envelopes a little bit? You'll hear it start to factor in a little bit more. So we're just using the self-oscillation of the filter to kind of create that top end, and then the bottom end is just coming from the fact that I have, instead of just like C3 or whatever, I've put the root note and the correct octave as well. So if we would move that up, you can kind of hear the the full version of the sound and the synthesis as it's happening, where you just got a really kind of solid sine fundamental, and then you've got that pitch envelope on the top giving it the click as well. So, but what I actually realised about the sound was how kind of deep and solid it is. So let's just open it up a little bit more. You can see as well, all of these have really nice effects and macros, all of these presets built in. So let's just have a little go in some of these. It might not be right for the song, but they're always great to listen to. So so that's turning it into like a big kind of techno-y rumble. You might want to like gate that, or throw like a duplicated channel with that on, with like a time shaper on it to do some cool background effects. We've also got this like sonar, which is kind of tuning up as well as moving the filter and opening up a big reverb, which sounds great too. It's a little bit silly for the application here. It's kind of serious. So I'm kind of a serious guy, if you hadn't noticed. So we'll just allow the sonar for now. But then we've got the effects, which, you know, if one was to perhaps increase the BPM to 180 and perhaps, you know, come from the Netherlands, perhaps a little bit of the old action might be up your street. But again, you know, I'm a serious guy, so we're not going to do that. Okay, so then we just got a clone of the channel. I've pretty much just exported that and then used just a resample version for the ghost sidechain kick that everything else is going to. Next up, we've got some hi-hats. So I just used the 808 core kit for this. Use the flanger with a bit of lower amount, 4-bar repeat, and slightly higher time. So let's have a listen to that. So really, really easy, simple sound. Like I've barely tweaked this. I haven't even touched the controls here. But adding this in just means you have that little bit of motion over 4 bars, and as well the time value means that it starts to get to that point in the kind of flanger cycle where the different parts of the sound start to like desync, but not too far. So if we were to crank this up, you can really hear the kind of a kind of rubbery effect. Almost reminds me if you've ever hit like 2 pool balls together. But yeah, we didn't want too much of that. But all that's doing is basically just not making it sound like, you know, sample, 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 sample. Just making each one have slightly different motion and movement inside it. So let's get that kick and that hi-hat in with the bass line. A bit basic, but as soon as we add in the other parts, this one's interfering a little bit too much with that channel 22, so I'm just going to use one of my other favourite plugins, Track Spacer, to create some space in the mix for this one here. So set the sidechain to number 22. Really important with Track Spacer is to use the attack and release controls to get the fastest response time. Another really underlooked feature of this is the mid side, super useful. But anyway, just making a little bit of space inside that big loop there for the initial kind of punch of these sounds here. So let's get the melodic parts in. Pretty nice cruisy loop. All we're missing now is really the kind of additional high end and percussion, so I just used a few hits from my sample pack that I've chopped up. These aren't processed too much, so get the other one in. Just wait for my moment. I'm a DJ after all. Okay, let's take the melodic parts out a little bit. Strip it down to the real techno groove. So yeah, really, really simple. If you're interested in these samples, by the way, you can check out the sample packs on my Bandcamp. Lisene.bandcamp.com. I think you might enjoy them. But yeah, that's kind of a little brief overview of how I've used the Pigments synth to throw together a really quick loop that could definitely be used for the start of a song, and has hopefully inspired a few of you to go check out the deep features and actually super capable presets as well of this really great, versatile, and I'd say one of the best modern synths you can get, to be honest. So all I could really think of adding to this loop before it sounds pretty complete is just a little bit more kind of swishy high end. So to that effect, just used off the shelf 808 kit, just using the open hi-hat, and we've got a expression control with some randomization going to the filter frequency. The range is not super huge on this, but I wanted it to just have a little bit of motion and excitement in there. So I just want that kind of low part of the signal. We've got a little bit of LFO going to this filter as well, so it's not completely random. It's kind of moving the range left and right that the randomness is operating in, and then it's just going to one of those same delays that we used earlier on the I don't remember what sound it was, this one here. So using the mid-side desynced delay to just give a little bit of a different character to it. Then we just got a little bit of EQ, so just dipping down when that main hi-hat comes in, and also when the kick comes in, just so it doesn't get super overpowering with all the delays. And then, yeah, a bit of track spacer to these percussion loops to drop it back in the mix a little bit behind everything else. So let's just turn that on and have a listen. So that's the sound in its own. So I didn't want it to be super aggressive. That's why we kept that filter value quite low. I didn't really want these frequencies coming through because they'd just be interfering with all the other drum sounds. But a little bit of randomness and interest in this kind of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8K area, really, really nice, and just thickens up everything else and gives the song a little bit more body, because we actually don't have that many drum sounds or any kind of big hits in here. We just got the kind of deep kick and the more subdued sounds. So having this kind of random, interesting, swishy kind of movement in the background just then kind of completes it. So play around with it. So you might notice we've got a few additional patterns hiding here as well. This other bass channel, by the way, is just an exact clone of this one. I just liked the sound when I found it, but I wanted to see if there were any other good bass sounds before I came back to it, so I just duplicated the channel and started moving around on the second one. But actually, these are functionally identical, so we can just get rid of that one. How's that for confidence? So yeah, you can see these other alternative kind of MIDI patterns, and these are just something I do as kind of standard when I'm building out these loops, and that's the equivalent of just having multiple session view clips where you've got like a simplified version of a melody or rhythmic part and a more complicated version. I find it's always easier to make the more complicated version first and then just strip it back. So just try and figure out like what the core notes or rhythm of that sound are, and then you can kind of just adjust to it. So like here, instead of just having that chord sequence playing where it's going we just get a little bit of a different feel in that second chord. So just a little bit deeper, a little bit more interesting. And then here, for example, on this drone, I've just added in some descending notes, and we're pretty much entirely pentatonic this whole way through, by the way, because it's just one of the easiest scales to use. So we just get more harmonics. More of that kind of crunchy background sound in there as well. So I probably would begin the track with these two, and then as the track kind of progressed, maybe in like a break or something would be a good time to introduce these second patterns, because they do kind of take away from the loopiness of these initial patterns, where it just kind of rolls really nicely. I would be a little bit careful in how I was deploying these. I wouldn't want to be kind of rinsing these big chord changes all the time without having a really kind of firm anchor in place to make sure the groove keeps rolling as well through that. So yeah, when this one's playing, you can barely even hear the kind of difference between these two here. So like I would maybe necessarily not have that play when we're doing the chord change. So as well, we've got this second bass part. So yeah, I realised that these kind of extra flavour notes here are not exactly working when they're playing over this chord. So again, we just kind of got rid of the extra parts here and just stripped it back to the very basics, where we just got the root note and the 2 semitones below the D. So that's a pretty good overview of what I do to get inspired and incorporate a new synth into my workflow. As you can see, I've had a really good time with this. It hasn't been too much work to get something really, really good sounding out of this, with only a little bit of processing on some of the sounds after the initial sound. When I do use sounds as a sound source for processing, the initial sound still has to be really, really solid, and Pigments is just that. It lets me synthesize sounds through 4 different types of synthesis. It's got really, really good modulation, and the visibility and kind of clarity of what everything does is one of my favorite things about it, as I've been saying this whole time. Just so easy to learn synthesis with, so easy to learn as a new synth that you've just picked up as well. Really can't recommend this enough. So as well as Pigments, this whole time while making this, I've been using the Minilab 3 controller, and I'm not a huge keys player. I know my scales, that's about it. I'm not amazing or anything. I don't have the space for a full length MIDI keyboard on my desk. So this little thing has actually been perfect, and it's slotted into my setup really nicely over the last few weeks. And what I really like about it is the script. So if you install the script, and there's multiples for lots of doors, you just get it off the website. As soon as you click on these channels, you can see down here, Minilab is controlling this. So I haven't set up anything in the MIDI mapping for this, it's just automatic. So I just go here, and then each pot is just going to control the corresponding macro knob. That goes the same for like unmacroed parameters as well. So if we just click on the sling filter here, then knob number 1 is going to control here. So we just instantly have access to a lot of the different parameters on our devices without having to set up anything in terms of MIDI mappings, which is super inspiring and super useful creatively as well. Because if you have a really solid idea going, and then you find yourself like menu diving to set up like mappings and stuff, or to do anything really, it can pull you out of that zone and like make you forget what was so good about the idea. So anything that minimizes that is really good in my books. Big fan. That same script is available for a lot of the other DAW programs as well as Ableton. It works really, really well. I'm a big fan. So to sum up, we've pretty much just come across a random preset, found it inspiring enough to create all these things to fill around it, and ended up with quite a nice loop that could be the start of a nice chill techno track. So I hope that's a good demo of how creatively inspiring this synth really is, as well as its limitless possibilities with all the different synthesis types, the modulations and everything I've been talking about already. I'm a really big fan of this. I'll be using it for years to come, I think. I feel like I've only really scratched the surface of what it can do as well, which is really exciting. So I hope that you decide to give it a go. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you want to see more of this kind of thing, hit me up on Instagram. I do one-to-one Ableton tuition. I hope you have a really nice day. Take it easy.